The shuttle's engines powered down with a soft hiss as Captain Jake Morrison checked his uniform one last time. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. This wasn't his first alien contact mission, but it was definitely the most important one. The whole future of human-alien relations could depend on the next few hours. "Remember, Captain," came the voice of Ambassador Lisa Carter through his earpiece. "The Vithrak don't shake hands or bow. They use sound waves to communicate respect. Just stand still and let them do their thing. Whatever you do, don't move when they start the greeting ceremony." Morrison nodded. Even though Carter was back on the command ship orbiting the planet, the shuttle door opened with mechanical whir, and he stepped out onto what looked like a giant mirror made of black glass. The surface was so smooth and perfect that he could see his reflection clearly. Above him, the sky was a deep purple color with 3 moons hanging like silver coins. But it was the aliens that made his breath catch in his throat. The Vithrak were massive, standing at least 12 feet tall. They looked like someone had carved people out of living crystal. Their bodies were translucent, with veins of light running through them like glowing rivers. There were 6 of them waiting in a semicircle, and they were all making this low humming sound that he could feel in his bones. Morrison had read all the files, seen all the pictures, but being here in person was completely different. The sound they made wasn't just noise. It was like music and conversation, and something deeper all mixed together. It made his teeth hurt and his stomach feel funny, but he forced himself to stand straight and look confident. The biggest Vithrak stepped forward. This had to be High Resonator Thexval, their leader. The creature was even more impressive up close. Its crystal body was a deep blue color, and the light veins pulsed with each sound it made. 2 glowing eyes that looked like stars stared down at Morrison. "Standard greeting protocol," Morrison whispered to himself, remembering his training. "Stay calm, stay still, show respect." He planted his feet shoulder-width apart and clasped his hands behind his back, the way he'd practiced 100 times. The other Vithrak began to hum louder, and Morrison felt the vibrations getting stronger. It was like standing next to a giant speaker at a concert. The sound waves were so powerful that his vision started to blur slightly. Small pieces of crystal dust began falling from the ceiling as the harmonics intensified. Thexval raised one massive arm. The limb was as thick as a tree trunk and came to a sharp point that gleamed like a sword. The humming stopped suddenly, and the silence was almost as overwhelming as the noise had been. Morrison could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "This is it," he thought. "Whatever happens next, don't move. Don't flinch. Show them that humans aren't weak." The blast hit him before he even saw it coming. It wasn't visible light or fire or anything physical. It was pure sound, concentrated into a beam of sonic energy that slammed into his chest with the force of a speeding truck. The world exploded into pain and noise and confusion. Morrison felt his feet leave the ground. He was flying backward, his body completely out of control. Time seemed to slow down as he tumbled through the air. He could see the shocked faces of his security team through the shuttle's windows. He could see the Vithrak watching him with what looked like satisfaction. Then he hit the wall. The impact drove all the air from his lungs. Crystal shards rained down around him as spider web cracks spread out from where his body had struck. Something inside his chest snapped with an audible crack that echoed through the chamber. Then another crack, and another. Morrison slumped to the ground, tasting blood in his mouth. His vision was fuzzy, and every breath felt like someone was stabbing him with a knife. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear the Vithrak making new sounds. Softer sounds, almost like they were whispering to each other. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his entire torso like lightning. But he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was still breathing. The crystal chamber fell deadly quiet. The only sound Morrison could hear was his own ragged breathing, and the steady drip of his blood hitting the obsidian floor. The 6 Vithrak stood frozen like statues, their glowing veins dimmed to almost nothing. For creatures made of living crystal, they suddenly looked very fragile. High Resonator Thexval's massive form began to shift colors, cycling through deep blues and purples that Morrison's briefing materials had said meant distress. The alien's harmonic voice dropped to barely a whisper, so low that Morrison felt it more than heard it. The organic is terminated. Thexval said to the other Vithrak in their musical language, "Begin the death ritual. We must apologize to his species for this failure." But Morrison wasn't dead. He was hurt, badly hurt, but very much alive. And he was getting tired of lying in a pile of crystal rubble like a broken toy. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he placed his palms flat against the wall behind him. His left shoulder felt like it was on fire, and breathing was like trying to suck air through a straw. But Jake Morrison had been in worse situations before. Much worse. The first time he tried to push himself up, his arms gave out and he slumped back down. The Vithrak didn't even notice. They were too busy preparing what looked like some kind of funeral ceremony, humming in low, sad frequencies that made the whole chamber vibrate gently. "Come on, Morrison," he muttered to himself, spitting out a mouthful of blood. "You've walked away from shuttle crashes. You've survived vacuum exposure. You're not going to let some overgrown rock collection think you're dead." On his second attempt, he managed to get his feet under him. Pain shot through his ribs like lightning bolts, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through it. His vision went black for a moment, but he held on to consciousness through sheer stubbornness. The first Vithrak to notice him moving was one of the smaller ones. Its harmonic frequency jumped up so high that it sounded almost like a scream. The others turned, and their glowing eyes went wide with something that looked very much like terror. Morrison used the wall for support as he slowly, painfully pulled himself upright. His uniform jacket was torn in 3 places, and he could see dark stains spreading across the fabric, where he was bleeding. His left arm hung at his side like dead weight, and he was pretty sure at least 4 of his ribs were cracked. But he was standing, and more importantly, he was grinning. Well, Morrison said, his voice rough but steady. That was refreshing. He wiped blood from a corner of his mouth with his good hand. "I was getting a little drowsy during the trip. Thanks for the wake-up call." Thexval's color shifted from deep purple to a bright, almost blinding white. The harmonic frequencies coming from all 6 Vithrak started jumping around wildly, like a radio trying to find a signal. Morrison didn't need a translator to know they were panicking. "This is impossible," Thexval boomed, his voice so loud that fresh cracks appeared in the already damaged wall. "You cannot be functioning. Our greeting has never failed to terminate organic life. Never. Not in 3,000 cycles." Morrison straightened his torn jacket as best he could with one working arm. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through his chest, but he kept that stupid grin on his face. "Where I come from, we call that a love tap." He looked directly at the 12-foot crystal being who had just tried to kill him. "That all you got, big guy?" The sound that came from the assembled Vithrak wasn't music anymore. It was pure shock, a harmonic shriek of disbelief that hit frequencies so high they made the chamber's crystal windows ring like bells. Morrison had to cover his ears with his good hand to keep his eardrums from bursting. Several of the smaller Vithrak actually took steps backward, which Morrison found amusing. Here he was barely able to stand, bleeding internally, with enough broken bones to put most people in a coma, and they were backing away from him like he was some kind of monster. "Fascinating," Morrison said once the noise died down. "So I take it most species don't survive your handshake?" Dr. Emily Watson burst through the shuttle's airlock the moment the all-clear signal came through. Her medical bag bounced against her hip as she ran across the obsidian platform, her scanner already beeping wildly in her hand. Behind her, 3 security officers followed with a portable medical stretcher, their faces grim with worry. "Captain Morrison," she called out, her voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "Don't move. We're coming to get you." But Morrison was already moving, much to everyone's horror. He had pushed himself away from the cracked wall and was standing on his own 2 feet, swaying slightly but upright. Blood had dried in a dark line from the corner of his mouth down to his chin, and his left arm hung at his side like a broken wing. Watson's scanner was going crazy, beeping and flashing red warnings faster than she could read them. The device was practically screaming about critical injuries, but the man it was scanning looked like he was ready to continue a casual conversation. "Captain, you need immediate medical attention," Watson said, holding up her scanner. "This thing is telling me you should be in a coma right now." Morrison glanced at the device and waved his good hand dismissively. That old thing? It's been acting up for weeks. Probably needs a software update. He winced slightly as he turned back toward the towering Vithrak, but his voice remained steady. I'm fine, document. Just a love tap from our new crystal friends here. Watson stared at him in disbelief. She had been a field medic for 15 years, had seen soldiers keep fighting with injuries that should have dropped them instantly, but this was beyond anything in her experience. Her scanner was reading 17 separate bone fractures, internal bleeding in multiple organs, and trauma levels that should have resulted in immediate death. So, Morrison said to the still-stunned Thexval, straightening his torn jacket as if nothing had happened, "Shall we continue with the negotiations? I believe you were about to tell us about this greeting ceremony of yours." The high resonator's massive crystal form was cycling through colors so rapidly it looked like a disco ball. When Thexval finally spoke, his subsonic voice was trembling with something that sounded very much like fear. "Your species," the alien said slowly, each word vibrating to the chamber like distant thunder. "How do you function with such damage? Our analysis shows 17 fractures, internal bleeding, severe trauma to your organic systems. By every calculation we possess, you should be dead, not just unconscious. Dead." Morrison shrugged with his good shoulder, which sent a fresh wave of pain through his chest that he completely ignored. "Humans are tough to kill," he said matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "We've got redundant organs, dense bones, high pain tolerance. Evolution made us pretty hard to break permanently." Dr. Watson was running her scanner over him again, shaking her head at the readings. "Captain, you have 4 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, internal bleeding, and what looks like a mild concussion. How are you even standing right now?" "Practice," Morrison replied with that infuriating grin still plastered on his face. He looked back at Thexval, whose color had shifted to a pale, worried blue. "Plus, I've had worse than this." He reached up with his good hand and pulled down the collar of his uniform, revealing a jagged scar that ran from just below his left ear all the way across his throat to his collarbone. The mark was old but still clearly visible, a white line against his tanned skin. "Hostile first contact with the hegemony 3 years back," Morrison explained casually. "They tried to cut my head off with an energy blade. Missed my jugular by about 2 millimeters. Spent 3 weeks in a medical pod, but I was back on duty within a month." The security team behind Watson exchanged glances. They all knew the story, but hearing Morrison tell it so casually while standing there with enough injuries to kill most people was somehow both inspiring and deeply unsettling. Thexval's harmonic voice dropped to barely audible levels. "The hegemony attempted to terminate you, and you survived?" "Survived and negotiated a peace treaty," Morrison said proudly. "They actually respected the fact that I didn't die when I was supposed to. Turns out a lot of alien species find human durability either terrifying or admirable. Sometimes both." The crystal chamber suddenly filled with music, but it wasn't the kind of music Morrison had ever heard before. The 6 Vithrak began creating harmonies that seemed to come from deep inside their crystal bodies, notes so low they made the floor vibrate, and so high they made his ears ring. It was like listening to an entire orchestra, but instead of instruments, it was made of living beings of pure crystal. Thexval's massive form began shifting colors faster than Morrison could follow. Deep blue flowed into bright silver, then shifted to gold, then back to blue again. The other Vithrak were doing the same thing, their bodies flashing and changing like living rainbows. Morrison realized this had to be some kind of serious conversation, the alien equivalent of a heated debate. Dr. Watson stepped closer to Morrison, her medical scanner still beeping warnings. "Captain, whatever they're discussing, you really should let me treat those injuries. Your left lung might be collapsed." "In a minute, Doc," Morrison said quietly, never taking his eyes off the aliens. Something important was happening here, something bigger than just a failed diplomatic greeting. He could feel in the way the Vithrak were moving, the urgency in their harmonic conversation. The musical debate went on for several minutes. Sometimes individual voices would rise above the others, creating beautiful solos that made Morrison's chest vibrate. Other times they all sang together in perfect harmony that was so gorgeous it almost made him forget about the pain in his ribs. Finally, the music stopped. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft drip of water, somewhere in the distance, and Morrison's slightly labored breathing. Thexval stepped forward, his crystal body now glowing a steady, warm gold color. "Human Morrison," the giant alien said, his subsonic voice filled with something that sounded almost like respect. "We must reveal to you a truth that we have hidden from all other species who have come to our world." Morrison straightened up as best he could, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through his chest. "I'm listening. For 3,000 of your Earth years, we have tested every species that has sought alliance with us," Thexval continued. "Our greeting is not ceremony. It is examination. It is trial by ordeal." The other Vithrak began humming softly in the background, creating a low musical accompaniment to their leader's words. Morrison noticed that their colors had all shifted to the same warm gold as Thexval's. "Every species that comes to us seeking friendship, we test with our harmonic blast," Thexval explained. "Those who die from it lack the physical strength to face the enemy that comes from the dark spaces between stars. Those who survive but flee in terror lack the courage and determination needed for what is coming." Morrison wiped fresh blood from his lip with the back of his hand. "And what happens to the ones who pass your test?" "In 3,000 years," Thexval said slowly, "no organic being has ever survived our greeting. The Korvaxi, with their armor hides, died instantly. The gaseous Netherians were scattered to atoms. The mighty Zephins, who could lift mountains with their minds, were crushed by forces they could not deflect." Dr. Watson made a small gasping sound behind Morrison. The security team shifted nervously, hands moving unconsciously toward their weapons. "But you," Thexval continued, his voice rising to a more normal volume, "not only survive our most powerful harmonic assault, but you smile at death itself. You make jokes while your body bleeds. You offer to continue negotiations while your bones are broken." Morrison dabbed at his lip again and shrugged with his good shoulder. "Where I come from, we got a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' It's not always true, but it sounds good." He gestured toward his backup team with his working arm. "And what does kill you? Well, that's what friends are for. We don't face things alone." The golden glow in Thexval's crystal body pulsed brighter. "This is why you are the first species to pass our ancient test. Your durability is impressive. But it is not just your physical strength that matters. It is your attitude toward danger, your willingness to laugh at death, your loyalty to your companions, even when facing impossible odds." Morrison felt his heart rate pick up, and not from his injuries. "So what's this void threat you're so worried about? What's coming that's got you testing everyone who shows up at your door?" 3 hours had passed since the most unusual diplomatic meeting in human history, and Morrison was finally letting Dr. Watson do her job. The medical bay on the human diplomatic ship was small but well-equipped, with everything needed to patch up injuries that came with exploring the galaxy and meeting new alien species. "Hold still," Watson muttered as she worked on Morrison's shoulder. "I need to get this joint back in its socket before I could do anything else." She had changed out of her blood-stained field uniform and into clean medical scrubs, her graying hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Morrison gritted his teeth as she manipulated his dislocated shoulder. "Just get it over with. Document. I hate the waiting part more than the actual pain." "On 3, Watson said. 1, 2. She popped the joint back into place on 2, the way medics always did. Morrison let out a string of colorful words that probably violated at least 6 different diplomatic protocols. "There," Watson said with satisfaction. "Now for those ribs. You've got 4 clean breaks and 2 hairline fractures. The good news is none of them punctured anything vital. The bad news is you're going to be sore for weeks." Through the viewport beside the medical bed, Morrison could see something that still amazed him. Massive Vithrak construction ships, each one the size of a small city, were working alongside human engineering vessels. The crystal beings were incorporating human armor-plating designs into their own technology, while human engineers were learning how to strengthen their shields with Vithrak harmonic resonance fields. "Would you look at that?" Morrison said, watching a human welding robot attach titanium plates to the hull of a Vithrak vessel. 6 hours ago, they thought we were just another species to test and probably kill. Now, they're sharing their most advanced technology with us. Watson followed his gaze and shook her head in amazement. I've been studying alien biology for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened down there. When I saw you get hit with that sonic blast, I was sure you were dead. Hell, according to every medical principle I know, you should have been dead. But I wasn't, Morrison said with a grin that was becoming his trademark, and that made all the difference. The medical bay door hissed open, and Lieutenant Tom Bradley walked in carrying a data pad and wearing an expression that was equal parts excitement and worry. Bradley was young, maybe 25, with the kind of eager energy that reminded Morrison of himself 15 years ago. "Captain," Bradley said, his voice barely containing his excitement, "you need to see this. The Vithrak are sharing everything with us. Deep space sensor networks, defensive technologies, star charts going back thousands of years. They're treating us like we're their new best friends." Morrison winced as Watson began wrapping his ribs with medical tape. "That's great news, Lieutenant. What's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Bradley's expression grew more serious. "Well, sir, it turns out there's a reason they've been testing every species that shows up at their door. Something big is coming. Something from outside our galaxy." "How big?" Watson asked, pausing in her work. "According to their long-range sensors, it's a fleet of ships unlike anything they've ever seen before. They call it the Void Swarm. It's been consuming entire star systems as it moves through the empty space between galaxies, and now it's heading straight for us." Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with his injuries. "How long do we have?" "Best estimate? Maybe 2 years before they reach the outer rim of our galaxy. Maybe less." Bradley handed him the data pad. "The Vithrak have been preparing for this fight for centuries, but they've never found anyone tough enough to stand with them. Until now." Morrison looked at the data, seeing star charts marked with a projected path of destruction. Entire solar systems had gone dark as the unknown enemy passed through them. "They think humans are crazy enough to fight something like this?" "Actually, sir," Bradley said with a slight smile, "their exact words were that we're too stupid to know when we're beaten and too stubborn to die when we should. They meant it as a compliment." Watson finished taping Morrison's ribs and stepped back. "Well, that's you patched up as much as I can manage. You should be on bed rest for at least a week." Morrison swung his legs off the medical bed and stood up carefully. Every movement hurt, but he was functional. "Tell them we accept the alliance, Lieutenant. After all," he said, looking out at the mixed fleet of human and Vithrak ships working together in the void of space, "how hard could it be?"